Alright, so here we have an ABUS 8850, and this is the guttable version of the 8840. Inside is the same ABUS Plus disc lock core. Butterflies in the top and the bottom if you have a newer one. If you have some older ones, sometimes they have just one on each side. So what we're going to do is show a pick and gut here. Some people wanted to see the inside of this bad boy and what the butterflies look like, what they do. So I'll kind of give a little bit of a rundown once I get it open. Opens with the key. And we're going to orient our handles. We're going to use the larger side. We're going to use the larger side there for the ABUS, and I'm going to use the ABUS markings. So to orient, I just put in. See if you can see. There we go. Hopefully that gets pretty good. Okay, and we're going to tension. And what I typically do, I think I already talked through a lot of this on the 8840, but I'm going to go and set the first disc first, and then pick the rest of them into just some kind of gate. Doesn't really matter. It's going to be a false or a true. Just give it a little bit of a bump, basically. Sometimes I also like to pulse tension. You may notice me doing that occasionally. That just kind of makes sure that if you're close to a gate, it'll push the sidebar into all the gates and basically get you all the way over. So another thing I do is, as I'm picking, I'm looking for that in the case of ABUS, a 6 cut, but the cut that goes all the way over. And once you find that, then you're going to use that for driving the lock and for, if you get lost halfway through, basically testing the tension and seeing where you're at and all that sort of stuff. So now we can just go through the pack and do what we did last time, determine where our false gates are and if we're in a true gate or a false gate. So on the ABUS, it's something more than a mark. That's what we're looking for to be our true gate. So if we got more than a mark, generally we're good, but we might have to go through the pack a couple of times to get there. Just because you sometimes dislodge discs. And there, you can also, there's probably only each disc, you're only going to have like 2 false gates and the true gates. Really, you're only going to get like 3 positions to check. So you can always, in that case, you can see it's almost 2 marks, maybe not quite, 1.5. But essentially, once you get to the right place, you want to, to give it a good check. So I usually just wiggle it back and forth, but if you're not really sure, you're thinking, maybe I'll go something else, you can always bump it over one more gate and see, okay, was that closer or was that further away? If you're not really sure where you're at in the lock. These ones are all looking pretty good. This one looks a bit more like a false. Yeah, and then I got much larger there. So again, if you're stuck, most of the time you can just kind of trial and error that way. We're looking like just one there. This. Yeah, that's much better. And we're open. So in this case, the very last disc right before the butterfly was my driving disc. So go ahead and show the guts on this guy. And just turning back and forth usually gets you out fairly easily there. See if I can show everything. Get a better view of our paint tray over here. And I've already taken out, under the shackle is actually a screw, and then unlike Abaloy has another little set screw you take out. Here, once you get that off, you dump out two little ball bearings. So those ball bearings basically push into some notches on this guy, and then once you have those out, you can turn this guy. So you really just need a key or anything to get it started. Let me see if I can do this so you can see. There you have it. And after that, you can just unthread it by hand most of the time. See that? Let me just use the key a bit more. And it's under a bit of, the whole pack is under a bit of spring pressure. So here you can see the little there's four notches that go all the way around, and those four are what the ball bearings press into. So now, best way to get the pack out is typically just to put your finger over it and invert it. See if we can get out everything all at once. Along with our sidebar is right there. Oh, it's a little bit hard to see in the camera. There's our sidebar at the top anyway. Alright. See down in there, we just have the drive cam. So more or less we can set that guy away. Here we'll take our sidebar, just dump it out in one of these slots right there. Sidebar on the ABUS is perfectly round, and the rest of everything else is contained in here. You can see we just have a cutout for the sidebar on the core, not tabs like you do on an Abaloy. Okay, so we have our first disc is our it's our free spinner, they call it, or I call it. Whatever. So we're going to put it up here. That's just a profile disc. Funny enough, there's not a profile to the disc, which there is on Morse locks, but there's a profile to the key. I was kind of wondered about that, why they didn't put that same profile in the disc. But in any case, now you can see here's one of our butterflies, and it's named that because of, oh, it's probably a bit hard to see, but it has a bit of a butterfly-ish shape to it. Maybe the light is in order. It has a little bit of a butterfly shape to it, if you can see that. As opposed to the next discs that I'll pull out will have more of a just a square shape to the center. This is just a spacer. I'll put all the spacers aside. Code disc. So again, our code discs, if you see, they look a bit more, oh, can't quite see that. Okay. So you can see over here. Yeah. So the code discs you can see there looks a bit more square in cross-section or profile. And we do have our false notches, so we have our true gate right here. And And then right next to it here and here, in this case, are our false notches. It's pretty hard to see. I'll give a close-up afterwards. Let's just go ahead and get this thing. In any case, the whole purpose of a disc lock is obviously to rotate the discs into the right position. And we need some disc. Typically, on most locks, they use the front and the back disc for reliability to drive the lock. In other words, to make sure that it opens, the key pulls it around and sets it in the right place. So those typically your front and last discs are not your code discs. And in many of the cheaper locks, those front and last discs, so starting here and going all the way to the end, are either disc you can tension on. That's why people talk about front tension or rear tension with disc locks. In the case of the ABUS here, with the new cores, what they attempt to do is put this butterfly disc, or you could call it an over travel disc. So if you tension on it, it travels just a bit too far past where the sidebar notch is. So there's only one sidebar notch on here, or one true gate, I guess you could call it. It over travels past that if you tension on it. Whereas the key would turn it, being square, just turns it to the right place, if that makes sense. So there's no ideal disc to tension on other than whichever of the discs they decided to make the true tensioner, or what drives the lock. So on many of the locks, again, it's the front and the back discs. They do it for reliability. They do it for maybe just ease, whatever else. But in the case of the ABUS Plus, they're using one of the code discs. So one of their code discs must be a cut all the way, or a 6, they call it, to fully drive the lock. And here should be our last disc, which is our driving disc in this case of this lock. It could be anywhere though in the pack. And our last spacer and our last butterfly. And that's it. We just have the bottom down there. Get you a shot. Oh. So just milled out in the bottom. The core has the tabs built into it for preventing over travel and those sort of things. So that milled out bit, or that raised bit there, is what prevents the disc from over travel, as opposed to Abloy uses a tab design and a milled out core. Not really a whole lot of difference, to be honest. It's just how they wanted to do it. So let me bring you in for the close-up of all of the discs. So you can see once again we have our first butterfly and our last butterfly, all of our code discs. This disc was the 6 cut in ABUS World and the driving disc. And this was our front free spinner, all of our spacers, and our sidebar right here. That's all there is to a basic disc lock, although this one obviously has a little bit more to it with the front and rear butterflies and false notches. But in comparison to many Abloys, there's not other crazy stuff going on. So our method here, which I mentioned in the 8840 video, is essentially tension on our rear butterfly. We're not going to get great feedback on this disc and sometimes this disc, although as you progress, usually you can start to get feedback on these two discs if you're picking well. So what I do is I set this disc to the first butterfly. You could turn it all the way and then just back a little bit, and you'll feel it click a little bit. And then just start picking down the stack, then work our way backwards, then usually one back through, and by that time you can usually find which disc is the one that's your 0 cut all the way, or your 6 cut, and you can give it a crank and it should open your lock as long as you've determined your false notches with the silver bullet marks. I'm sure everybody's seen nice copper pinning tray. Looks pretty cool. Could go with it a copper silver bullet, or if you like brass better. We'll be selling the silver bullets as soon as I can get the tips and everything made. Right now I'm working on the handles. They will be coming soon, so those interested, stay tuned.